Welcome to Thrive Deeper, an ongoing conversation with Dr. Matthew Jacoby, author of the Thrive Bible Reading Guides, teaching pastor, and leader of the Psalmist band Sons of Korah. Join us as we go deeper into the Bible, discussing the passages as we read them together with Thrive. Now here's your host, DJ Payne.
Hello and welcome to Thrive Deeper, the podcast. It's DJ Payne here, and this is a very special episode. I've got to say this right from the upfront, and I'd never thought we would be doing this in Thrive Deeper. This is a little bit of an adults-only episode. If you're used to listening to this with the kids or openly, in the family room or anything like this, unless your children are of a certain age, you might not want to listen to this one openly. We're going to get right into the deep subjects that are in the beginning of Proverbs about sex and sexuality and the struggle around that. Now, if that's something that, might trigger you or might not be appropriate for little ears, be mindful of that as we get into this week's episode. But I think this is an important one. Men, I'm looking at you. I think this is a real important one that God wants you to listen to. So after the break, we get into it in the book of Proverbs on Thrive Deeper. Hang on, I can't win on that one. So Matt, as we're actually recording this episode now, this is so typical of the two of us.
Yeah.
It is Valentine's Day night.
Yeah.
As we record, we're doing a late night session.
We're having a romantic,
a bromantic session. A bromantic session. We've left our wives at home, our good wives at home. It's Valentine's Day. We are here recording a podcast. Yeah. What did you do? Come on, you.
Well, it's partly because, at the moment my dad's staying, and we normally, we record Fridays, and I wanted to spend the day with my dad, so hence here we are late at night. But yes, it is Valentine's Day.
Now I know you're a hopeless romantic, not. But what? Tell me, and let's impress all of the lady listeners. What did you do for your wonderful wife today?
When she said to me this morning, it's Valentine's Day, I said, "Oh, is it?"
And is that all you did? That's pretty much.
No, I told her that I loved her, and did I gave her a hug.
Oh boy, our long-suffering wives.
I know, our long-suffering wives.
Wives. God bless them.
Far too much for granted.
Well, in light of talking about our wives and these amazing women of wisdom that we have both got in our lives, that God has given us. Let's move into the book of Proverbs. Last week we had a look at a bit of a big picture introduction and sort of got a bit personal into the themes of wisdom and how it sort of fleshes out in the Bible. Looking at the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and that's a theme that's going to run throughout the whole book of Proverbs. And there's so many different ways we could go through the book, and we could pull it apart verse by verse, word by word, any way like that. But there are a lot of major topics and themes about life through the book of Proverbs.
There are. And at each point, certain themes seem to come to the fore. So there's themes like work and relationships, conflict, money, sexuality, all of these sorts of things.
Drinking, leisure time, everything, everything.
Yeah. Which actually, I think it's a good opportunity for us to actually talk about some of those topics because what Proverbs wants to offer us is God's wisdom on these aspects of real life. So that's great. Well, let's talk about some of those issues and let's do what Solomon did, which is draw wisdom from wherever he found it. In the last episode, we talked about how Solomon, we have this collection called the Sayings of the Wise. And so we see that Solomon draws wisdom from all over the place and in thinking about different aspects of life. And I'm a real collector in a similar sense. I love reading, and I and everything that I read, I actually read digital books. I read everything on Kindle or Logos Bible program that I use, either on one of those two platforms generally, and so that I can actually cut paste because I have these OneNote, the program OneNote in Microsoft, if you're a Microsoft user, which allows you to store all your notes. I have got so many OneNote files of books that I have read and taken notes, and so stuff collected from all over the place. But what Proverbs have prompted me in the last couple of weeks, partly because at church we're going to take a topical approach to the book of Proverbs.
Yep.
And so we're going to focus on the topics that Proverbs focuses on at different points. And so I got thinking about the issue of sex and sexuality, because this is the initial theme really that comes up
Big time.
in those first 9 chapters. So as we talked about last week, you have wisdom personified as this young woman who calls out and who has this very legitimate allure, and Solomon says to his son, "Get wisdom, though it cost you all that you have. Get wisdom," And she calls out, and she's desirable above all things. But then on the other hand, he contrasts this with the adulterous woman or the prostitute, or however, there are lots of different ways in which we can see that, because of course there was also ritual prostitution. Which was very common in Old Testament times at the high places where there would be an Asherah pole. You'd also have cult prostitutes that were there. And so this was a real part of life. And so Solomon, as he's speaking, personifying wisdom as this young woman that's crying out, that is desirable above all, he contrasts that to the adulterous woman or the prostitute who also cries out and calls to us and has this allure, who will also cost everything that we have, but who ruins our lives. The one woman, wisdom, gives life. The other woman, who I think in that context can stand for vice, sin, temptation generally, but I think we can take that quite literally as well, is one who ruins lives. And it got me thinking about this issue in our day and age, and the way that we experience this issue now. And I think actually the biggest undermining factor, I mean, if I'm thinking as I read these words and of Solomon saying, "My son," and warning the sons of Israel, as it were, against sexual temptation, I couldn't but help to think about what I believe is the biggest issue that is undermining men and masculinity in our day, and that is the issue of pornography. Because I think that this issue is really one of the most. It's not only one of the most serious that we face in terms of sexuality, in terms of an issue that undermines particularly men, increasingly women as well.
Yes.
So this is not just about men anymore, and it certainly affects women indirectly. But it is actually something in its present form. This problem of pornography is quite a current issue because of the accessibility that we have to it since the advent of the internet, and particularly since the advent of tablets and smartphones. And it's like one click away. And also partly, I've been interested to see the absolute flourish of literature, and there's documentaries on TV about this, and because more and more men are coming out. I mean, there are forums that like online forums that are drawing millions of men from all over the world. And I'm not talking about Christian men, just men all over the world who have discovered that this is ruining their lives. That just like the adulterous woman or the prostitute that Solomon talks about, where he says, she will also cost all that you have, but she's going to destroy your life. I mean, the lives of men all over the world are being destroyed, and this is being acknowledged on these forums.
Yeah.
And there are a number of reasons why, but one of the most, one of the most interesting aspects about this whole discussion is the way that it's now being acknowledged that this is an addiction. Now being broadly acknowledged that actually the way that pornography affects the brain is pretty much the same as heroin or cocaine affect the brain. There's a proverb in Proverbs 6, 27, says these words: "Can a man scoop fire into his lap without his clothes being burned? Can a man walk on hot coals without his feet being scorched?" And looking at pornography, or as one, I heard an interview on a podcast the other day where a psychologist prefers to use the term participating in pornography, because he's basically saying that's basically what guys do. It's not just looking at, there's an actual sense of imaginary participation in it that sort of activates these parts of the brain. If I can, I'm going to read to you something because I think, look, a lot of guys just think, oh, look, it's in private, no harm done. Well, actually, massive harm is being done. In fact, the same kind of harm is being done when you click on that website. It's exactly the same as if you would inject heroin into your veins. It's the same kind of damage is actually being done. So you need to think: would I do that? I mean,
and not just the drug analogy, but would you pursue that type of woman in real life? Would you pursue an activity with a woman like that?
Yeah, that's right.
Would you pursue, and again, not trying to be judgmental to a woman, but would you pursue a relationship like that? Would you want, it's not just like you say, it's not just a private act in your own thing. You're rewiring yourself. You're reprogramming yourself.
So, there's a book called The Porn Myth, which I recommend. Matt Fradd, I think the author's name is. I didn't make a note of the author, but I'm pretty sure that's his name. He sort of sums up some of this research. Look, there's actually a lot of books available about this, and also there's a great website called Fight the New Drug that has really good resources, fightthenewdrug.org or something. But just do a search on Fight the New Drug.
We'll have the links up in the show notes.
That's right. It's got information for, concerned partners. It's got stuff there for guys. It's got testimony. It's got information from doctors. It's got all of the, research. It's got these great little videos. And anyway, in this book, the Porn Myth, Matt Fradd talks about how it affects our brains, and particularly our dopamine levels in our brain, in the chemistry of our brain. And he says this, he says, dopamine helps to lay down memories in the brain so that the next time a man or woman is in the mood, the brain remembers where to return to experience sexual pleasure, whether that is a lover or the laptop in the den. But scientists are now seeing that continued exposure to porn gives the brain an unnatural high beyond what it's wired to handle. And the brain eventually fatigues. Anatomy and physiology instructor Gary Wilson notes that drug abuse causes the same phenomena. The brain becomes desensitized. More and more of the drug or harder drugs are needed to get the same high, and the downward spiral of addiction begins. Wilson says that chemical overstimulation brings about significant changes in the brain, both for drug abusers and for porn abusers, and it's actually the same kind of change. So he says here, one of those changes is the erosion of the frontal cortex, that all-important center of executive control. Neurosurgeon Donald Hilton explains that what scientists are seeing in their research. A study on cocaine addiction published in 2002 showed shrinkage in several areas of the brain, particularly in the frontal control areas among cocaine users. A similar study from 2004 showed very similar results for methamphetamine addicts. Now, we expect that with drugs, but interestingly, a study published in 2007 discovered exactly the kind of brain damage in persons who have severe pornography addiction. Yeah. So in this case, he goes on to say here, if the frontal lobes of the brain are weakened, when the craving for porn hits, there is very little willpower to regulate the desire, because it's like you end up with what psychologists call impulse control disorder. That's it. Impulse control disorder. Because actually the parts of the brain that control impulses are weakened by these drugs that we're using, whether it's cocaine, methamphetamines, or pornography.
Yeah.
These parts of our brains are actually weakened by that. So he says here, if the frontal lobes of the brain are weakened when the craving for porn hits, there is very little willpower present to regulate the desire. Neuroscientists call this problem hyperfrontality, in which the person slowly loses impulse control and mastery of his passions. Frad goes on to say, the point is this: the region in the brain that, when mature, is the mark of adulthood is the very thing that is eroded as people view pornography. It's as if viewing porn makes the brain revert to become more childish. Adult entertainment, ironically, is actually making people more juvenile.
Wow.
So we have to think of it like a drug. This is where this conversation needs to go.
And you have summed up very well Solomon's attitude about it when he talks about the adulterer.
Yeah.
The adulterous woman, whether that's an actual woman or like you say, it's a picture of vice. He talks about her in terms like her lips are dripping honey.
Yeah.
It's smooth like oil.
Yeah.
She'll bring you in and addict you to this thing.
That's
but
right.
there's a warning.
And,
so he
and
talks
he portrays
about
it like a trap that you get stuck in as well. And I think, this is where I in thinking about, well, how does this, because it would be easy to read what Solomon says and think, well, I'm not doing that.
Yes.
I'm just in the privacy of my own home. I'm actually just doing this. But here's the problem, is that not only are we destroying ourselves and essentially becoming drug addicts, but what the effect that porn, and this is actually one of the where the damage has happened in the lives of men, because what is actually being discovered now is that enormous numbers of young men, and I'm talking like 18, 19-year-olds, are reporting like sexual dysfunctionality, actually unable to perform sexually because they're so addicted to this drug, they actually don't respond to anything else. And Frad talks about how there's this drug cycle where you need something harder and harder and you need to go more and more extreme. And interestingly, on the website Fight the New Drug, they point out that, and there was also a documentary recently on SBS where it was pointed out that most of the searches that were done on major porn websites involve some form of violence and domination in the sexual act. So this is becoming, like, this is where this is going, and it's been linked with increasing levels of sexual violence as well. There's a direct link. Research has confirmed that. So actually, for guys where you've got 18 and 9-year-olds actually reporting impotence. I mean, not only that, but the way that it is more and more now destroying marriages.
Yes.
It's it destroys sexual relationships, but destroying marriages. It makes it actually, another recorded bit of research has directly linked, the unwillingness of men to commit, or even the inability of men to commit to long-term relationships, is again being directly linked.
And it's funny, and again, we're getting a little bit away, not in one sense from the text here, but you have that fighting on one side, this horrible, path to destruction, to bring up the words of Solomon, looks fantastic, and then you slide away into death. And then on the other side of our culture that we live in the West, we have this modern media saying, it's just what everybody does. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's very. In fact, who are you to talk badly of a sex worker?
Yeah.
Who are you to say that this person doesn't have a choice?
Yeah.
And you're having these conflicted interests of what, morality is just lost in here. And I think that's where we sort of come back to Proverbs to go, hang on, there is a bottom line here. There is a truth.
Because of course this is what everyone was saying back when Playboy started and all the controversy over the early rise of pornography. It was seen as liberated and kind of modern, and this is the modern world, and it was kind of celebrate it. And don't get me wrong, there still are people that are defending, there's plenty of people out there defending pornography, but there is an increasing, like an absolute chorus of voices. And I'm not talking about from the church.
No.
In the secular world that is pointing out, and this is research-based now, that this is a drug that is destroying the lives of men. And these forums, online forums that where men are gathering together, literally are drawing millions of men from all over the world. So, so this is the new kind of incarnation of the problem, I think, that Solomon is talking about. And, I think we need to rediscover the wisdom that Solomon is imparting us to us here.
Well, you've painted a great modern picture as we stand in 2019. In this part of the decade of what it's all about. We've painted the picture there. We're having a look at these first few chapters of Solomon. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get into Proverbs, get into the words here, and see how that applies to what you've talked about. Okay, we're in the first few chapters of Solomon, and the theme that is coming out to us is sexuality, relationship, especially in light of Solomon, who knew what he was talking about, being married to...
He did, actually. He did know what he was talking about.
Married to 300 women plus. He's talking to his sons, type of thing, whether they are his literal sons or, the men of Israel, people coming after us today, however you want to read it. It's a male, there is a male voice here as he's talking about women in contrast of the wisdom, the female presentation of wisdom, and then the adulteress. Now, Matt, you've done a great job of talking about the modern problem, in case, as we always like to do, to say, oh, look at those poor guys back then in that primitive times. That doesn't apply to me, 21st century man. How no, we've got it worse now than probably ever before. What do we do? How do we apply? Where do we go here in the word? How do we apply what Solomon is saying into our modern life?
Well, I think what Solomon is doing is, in those first chapters, is presenting a contrast. There are two voices calling out to us, and you avoid the one voice by heeding the other. Now, that goes both ways. So you avoid the voice of wisdom by heeding the voice of temptation. But also you avoid the voice of temptation by heeding the voice of wisdom. And so I think there's a key here in these early chapters. And now, of course, Solomon was concerned, like the Old Testament law, was concerned with the damage that that sexual sin does to families. It's not just about, this is just between me and if it doesn't hurt.
If it's not hurting anybody, if it's in the safety of your own bedroom, who cares what anybody does?
It always, if it does immense damage because our sexuality is part.
And not just to the immediate couple or the immediate family, but to the greater community.
To the greater community,
which is the ongoing theme here.
So and obviously, he's dealing with adultery and prostitution, and Solomon. A part of that is the concern for what that does to the community, particularly in a tribal, society. That's going to do enormous damage, but no less today. And this is the thing with pornography, is that people think because it's a private thing, therefore it's not going to affect anyone. Well, I've just mentioned before that we do immense damage to ourselves, our relationships, the way
and
we see
women. In all of that, Matt, we haven't even talked at all. This is a whole. We could spend episodes on this.
Yeah.
the actual damage it is doing to real life people today, to the women in the videos, to the industry around it. It is the most corrupt, wicked, evil industry doing real damage to real people today.
Yeah, that's
we're not even getting into that. We're just talking about application to us right now.
So, I think I don't think temptation can't be avoided in a vacuum. It's like dysfunctional desire needs to be replaced by the right kind of desire. I mean, we're made desiring creatures are what we are. Okay, so you can't just take away a desire. You can't just deny or repress a desire. It has to be refocused. And so the key is actually refocusing desire. Now, part of understanding the information about pornography, and part of the reason why I went through all of that information before, is because, like Solomon, this is wisdom from drawing this from all the different directions. This is wisdom crying out, saying, this is what this is going to do to you. Now, there's lots of amazing wisdom out there about the damage that pornography is doing in the lives of people, not just men but women also. But to overcome that, we need to tune ourselves into, I guess, to attune our desires to a different kind of life. You can't just leave an old life behind. To leave an old life behind, you have to actually step into a new kind of life. So if you want to, if you're feeling, really ashamed and hopeless, and well, actually, what we have the opportunity in Jesus Christ to do is actually step out of that guilt, to find forgiveness, to find a new beginning, and to step into a different kind of life, and a life where we actually seek God and seek God's Spirit and seek God's wisdom, to be filled with God's Spirit, to be filled with God's wisdom. And there's actually something that we can do about that. I mean, we can read and reflect on Scripture. We can, spend time with God. We can attune our hearts to good things and to, as Paul says, set your minds on things that are worthy and good and beautiful. And as we do that, we develop a taste for purity and righteousness and wisdom and these desirable things, and we strengthen ourselves against these things that are going to do us damage. I mean, it's interesting. One psychologist that I heard an interview with, his advice was so simple, but he talks about, if you want to avoid these things, you need to focus on your general well-being, your state of spiritual and mental and physical health. Because if you are spiritually and mentally and physically strong, we talked about just being physically disciplined, mentally, like stress can lead to, pornography use. If you are spiritually focused and you are in touch with the joy of God, and then all of these things actually strengthen us so that we can stand against temptation when it arises. So there's actually something positive that we can do, and this is the picture that I think we're given in Proverbs, and that is very much the answer. It is, we can avoid one voice by heeding to the other voice.
Yes.
It's all about what we tune into. So if you're going to click on something online, I mean, I recommend putting boundaries, there are some practical things that we can do in terms of putting boundaries around. But look, if you're going to click on something, go to one of these websites, Fight the New Drug, watch that video, and just remind yourself that instead, if I click on this, literally like I'm injecting a drug into my veins. Now, would you inject that drug into your vein? No, but essentially doing exactly the same thing. So it's like if you feel like you're going to make a negative choice, don't just try to repress that desire. Set your desire on something else. Go for wisdom. Pray, ask God to help you. This is this I think is where Proverbs presents these two voices and where this is so practical.
And the other principle in Proverbs that I really, in light of this, reading it again, that I really came out very strongly to me, and I think it's in large part to you banging on about community over and over and over again, is what Solomon is doing, this is getting a little bit meta, but Solomon is speaking out loud and writing and having a dialogue with the sons.
Yeah.
And he even says, I remember my dad talking to me. Yeah. And he's bringing up conversations around sexuality, around women, around these different points. Yeah. And it's that idea of community and discourse and being open and men talking to men, older men talking to younger men and saying, we can get through this together. Yeah. Let me remind you, remember this. Yeah. Don't let my words, and it's that constant affirmation.
Yeah, that's right.
And because you can't do it by yourself.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
We're not meant to do it by ourselves.
Absolutely. And in fact, one of the best things to do, and this is where all of these big online forums, I think, have been such a big part of men's journey to recovery, is that it's really important to come out and actually talk to someone about that. It doesn't need to be a pastor or a counselor, even just a trusted confidant, and just talk about it. Just get it out there, get it out of the darkness. Because if you bring something out into the light, then you can actually see it more objectively and look at it in the face. And there's an element of accountability in that as well. So I think that's a really good thing to do. I would love to see this conversation open up much more honestly, particularly in Christian circles, because I think it is a big problem. I think it's a problem that inevitably a lot of Christian men are going to be struggling with. I think it's keeping a lot of good men down.
Not inevitably they will be struggling. They are struggling right now.
Yeah, that's right.
They are struggling right now. And if you're going through this right now, I mean, we're going to have some links in the show notes of this. If you head over to thrivetoday.net, if you head over to thrivetoday.net.au, you look up episode 37, look up what we're talking about in Proverbs. We'll have links to what we've been talking about, websites and stuff that you can go to seek help. But my encouragement to you is, follow Solomon's plan here. Ask for wisdom. Seek wisdom. But B, exactly like you say, talk about it, because I encourage you right now, no man is going to, if you go to any man who has been down the road a couple of steps ahead of you, none of them are going to turn around and faint or be shocked or say, I can't believe they're going to go with you. And I know that God has placed in your life people, men who can walk you through this, and women the same. If you're listening, and women, you've got people in your life who can.
That's
help
right. Because we've talked a lot. I keep referencing men, but I've got to remember actually that the statistics are showing a growing proportion of women who are affected by this, and certainly indirectly affected. I know there are going to be women who are, who have been on the other end of this and are concerned about this. And again, some of these resources are really, really useful.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. All right, so as we wrap up this episode, Matt, in this first sort of topic, as we go through Proverbs and look at topics, can we leave it on a positive note, because there are positive notes in here about sexuality and about relationship, and that's something we sort of miss. We often miss as the we have a tendency to become a little bit Puritan sometimes, but Solomon talks very clearly about the joy and the wonder and the beauty of having, your wife fulfilling these needs.
That's right. So I think this is important because sometimes the Bible is mistakenly seen as being anti-sex and sexuality, but in fact it's very, very positive about sex and sexuality. Very positive. So positive, in fact, that we have a separate book of the Bible that is a celebration of sex and sexuality, which is the Song of Solomon. Yeah. And I know that there have been times in the past, interestingly, and this flourished in the Victorian era, when sex and sexuality was really under the rug, pushed under the rug, where that was interpreted purely in terms of, Jesus speaking to his church. And I think that can be a wonderful way to read this love poem. But actually, I think we need to accept that this is a celebration of romantic love and sex. Yeah. There's a whole book of the Bible that is a celebration of this. So this is a wonderful affirmation, actually, of this part of life that is a big part of life. And God has given us this as something to celebrate. But we need to do this God's way. You know, it's
Yeah.
like we have to stick within the parameters that God sets out. And the wonderful vision that we have already in Genesis 1 and 2 is that of a man and woman becoming one flesh. It's a beautiful vision. And together, in that experience of one flesh, that together they reflect the image of God. And that relational intimacy, that very intimacy that is expressed in sex and sexuality is in itself a real expression of the relational nature of God. So I think the Bible leaves us with something positive. It leaves us on a real joyful note when it comes to this issue. But the key thing is that as in all parts of life, let's heed wisdom. Let's heed wisdom. Let's do everything wisely, which means doing things the way God made things to be done.
Oh my goodness, we only scratched the surface of everything that we could have been talking about. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart as Matthew gets into sex and sexuality and Proverbs, into the modern problem with pornography and the fact that it isn't spoken openly about it as a struggle in the church. This is something that I know that might be deeply affecting you as you listen. And I really want to encourage you to do a couple of things. A, pray. If you're feeling convicted or struggling through this, please seek God right now. Next thing to do is talk to some people around you. Talk to that pastor. Find that person that God is putting on your mind right now that you know you can talk to. Go do it. And then lastly, if you don't have any of those resources around you, please head over to thrivetoday.net.au. Have a look for the links in episode 37, and we'll have some resources and stuff for that. You can also contact us through that website if there's questions, struggles, issues that you would like us to talk more about on this. Please contact us. We would love to help you any way we can. All right, well, we promise we won't be going back to that category anytime soon. We've got new topics to go through as we go through the book of Proverbs. Please stick with us. Hopefully this week is not the first time you're listening to the podcast, because it's not usually like this. Until next week, this has been DJ Payne for the whole crew here at Thrive Deeper. We'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to Thrive Deeper. We value all our listening community. If you are on Facebook, search and like Thrive Today page to get all of our latest updates. Join the conversation online with nearly 400 other listeners at facebook.com/groups/Thrive Deeper. Our home on the internet is at thrivetoday.net.au. There you can subscribe to the Thrive Daily Reading Guide and contact us directly. That's at thrivetoday.net.au. Our music is provided by the talented Rod Gear. For more information, head to rodgearmusic.com. The podcast is recorded at the studios of Geelong Christian Media Incorporated, then edited and produced by DJP.FM. Until next time, thrive.